Okay.
All right. We're going to get more into the sayings. We've been hitting some of them, a few of them as we've gone through the different topics, even in introduction. Tonight is primarily sayings of the Desert Fathers. And these are not deep theological discourses. They're not even deep theological thoughts. All right. They're plain, straight shooting. And if desert spirituality and desert sayings seem complicated or difficult to understand, you're doing it wrong. They're as simple as anything you can imagine. Just pull up a chair, uh, be edified. It's just common, ordinary wisdom. There we go. Got somebody joining us.
Stephanie Trussell said.
Hi, Hootie. Welcome aboard. We're just getting started and have a little bit of an alternate lesson plan. I knew as we get into the sayings to get more of them in, enough of them in for you to have an appreciation of actually what they have to say. There's a lot of readings. And once I mark the readings for tonight, there are 21 different sayings for tonight as I planned to do silence and solitude, kind of very similar. They were kind of grouped together. And when I read through the book, I put them together. And work was basically three different topics. And so I knew I wasn't going to get through all that. So I started with reviewing the sermon, which was on silence on Sunday. I always cover the sermon on Windows the first couple of days for the live streams for the week. So I did silence readings yesterday on Windows. Obviously today Facebook was down and the windows were closed. But so tonight we're going to not do those again. If you are watching on YouTube and want to hear those silence readings, they are on Mondays, yesterday's live stream on Windows at the St. Luke's. I did about 5 of those readings there on silence. So tonight the plan is to cover solitude, and if we get to work, we will do that. And if not, I'll do work on tomorrow and on the live stream. So there's a few on that. So tonight, start with solitude and see how far we get. Okay? Sound like a plan? All right. So I want you to hear these sayings. I want you to think about them and get to react to them. Because some of them are just fun. Some of them are rather blunt. I don't think I have any tonight that are that way. Some of them might be. On solitude, they get pretty persnickety. They're grouchy hermits who don't want to be disturbed, and it comes out when they talk about solitude. So we'll get started. I want you to hear those. Let's start with prayer. Holy God of silence, we come to you in the quiet of the day. Be with us in our time of silence as we go. Let go of words and chatter. Journey with us into the space of deep listening and stillness that we may pause, rest, and discover the magic to be found within the still point of our hearts. Amen. There's a reading from Thomas Merton that I thought was relevant for tonight. Let me seek then the gift of silence and poverty and solitude, where everything I touch is turned into a prayer, where the sky is my prayer, the birds are my prayer, the wind and the trees is my prayer, for God is in it all. It's an awareness of the stillness and hearing the voice of God through the stillness in all of those places. All right, we've talked about and mentioned maybe in some of the readings of the desert, the cell. Okay, so just kind of a background of what the cell is. This is their abode where they lived. The cell was of central importance in the Desert Fathers' asceticism. Sit in your cell, and it will teach you everything, Abba Moses said. The point was that unless a man could find God here in one place, in his cell, he would not find God by going somewhere else. But they had no illusions about what it meant to stay in the cell. It meant to stay there in mind as well as in body. To stay there in body, but to think about the outside world was already to have left it. Okay? And later, when we get to the fifth session about being monks in the world, they will talk about how that you can be in your cell, even in your city or in your work or whatever you're doing. You don't have, it's not necessarily a physical place as much as it is as a state of awareness and focus. So to be in a place without the focus misses the point. It's also possible to be in that state of awareness anywhere. It was just conducive to be out there where there was less stimulation and distraction. Okay, so that's the cell. So we'll get started with solitude. And I've got these kind of readings divided up into to categories on solitude, just being isolated alone, living the hermit life. Remember that sometimes they lived in groups, all individual hermits, but a very close proximity where they could come together for worship. Others were more isolated, but some of the extremes of isolation and solitude are what we're going to hear first. Aloysius, no, Alonius, there, Aloysius is somewhere else. Abba Alonius said, if a man does not say in his heart, in the world there is only myself and God, he will not gain peace. That sounds a little extreme, right? Sounds a little isolationist. So these guys were that. Here's one from, now, the name in the book, in the sayings for this monk is Abba John the Dwarf. And that's been corrected politically. And sometimes he's called John the Short. Okay. John the Short. And somebody, I won't say who, but somebody was commenting on the term desert fathers and mothers. Why is it mothers and fathers? That's because I'm reading it from here, and some like the term desert parents. Somebody was asking me about it, and I said, well, these guys, they never slept. They say 1 hour of sleep is enough. Seems to me that they're woke enough already. So we'll go with whatever you want to say, but for most of it depends on when it was written about, of what's being said. So I'll just include that as a point of interest as we get to John the Dwarf and what he has to say about extremes. 32. And he had quite a bit to say, and he was fairly gruff and not the most optimistic of monks. If a monk could be optimistic, it wasn't him. The same Abba John, was very fervent. Now, someone who came to see him praised his work. He remained silent, for he was weaving a rope. Once again, the visitor began to speak. Once again, he kept silent. The third time, he said to the visitor, since you have come here, you have driven God away from me. Do you ever feel like there's people that you want to say that to? what better way to tell somebody to get lost? You'll remember that one, won't you?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Might be able to use that sometime.
Yes.
Yeah, there's several of these that are quotable quotes, but it's amusing. But just did not want to be distracted from what he was doing. Now, at other times, remember how they say one thing at one time and something else at another time, or different teachers will say different things. Hospitality was of utmost importance. And they set aside a lot of their ascetic lifestyle in order to be gracious hosts. Maybe never eating except when they had visitors, and they would not fast. It's time to show hospitality. So, but sometimes it just seemed like it depended on the mood and maybe who the visitor was, that they could be rather cantankerous and contrary. But there's one that's a quotable quote for you, but that's kind of an extreme of their solitude, of how they did not want to be bothered. You've driven God away. Your fault. Isidore the priest. Some of them did have ecclesiastical positions and stations. Some of them went to the desert and were called back to do those things. And it seems like the ones that went back to do those things eventually headed back to the desert, preferred that. But some of them were in those positions first and then felt the call of the desert and left. So Isidore the priest was a monk in Skeets, an early companion of Macarius. He's one of the heads of the 4 communities in Skeets, so little villages of monks. There's a whole region that was their way of life of living in groups, became named after the part of the region that they were in, Skeets. Right, so Isidore the priest has this to say. Abba Isidore went one day to see Abba Theophilus, Archbishop of Alexandria. And when he returned to Skeets, the brethren asked him, "What's going on in the city?" But he said to them, "Truly, brothers, I did not see the face of any man there except the Archbishop." Hearing this, they were very anxious and said to him, "Has there been a disaster there, then, Abba?"
Pastor?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome. Is that Hootie?
Yes.
All right. Glad you're with us.
I'm glad to be here. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Emerson was laying down for a nap and she just woke up, so we're having dinner.
All right. All right. So he asked, did you see when they're no? Hearing this, they were anxious and said, "Has there been a disaster there then, Abba?" He said, "Not at all. But the thought of looking at anyone did not get the better of me." At these words, they were all filled with admiration and strengthened in their intention of guarding their eyes from all distractions. So there he was in the desert for years, finally returned to the city to see the Archbishop, and didn't even see anybody. Had and no thought of looking at anyone.
Kept his eyes down.
Yeah. So, imagine going on a field trip like that and not having anything posted on Facebook or even looking at anybody. All right, so here's one from Abba Simon. A magistrate came to see Abba Simon one day. When he heard of it, he put on his apron and went out to attend to a palm tree. When the visitors arrived, they called to him, old man, where is the anchorite, the monk?" He replied, "There's no anchorite here." Hearing these words, they laughed. Nobody home. Nobody home. So this was their extreme isolation. The anchorite don't live here anymore. All right. So they went to these extremes. So some of these sayings will talk about the importance of solitude. And this one comes from Anthony the Great. Abba Anthony once went to visit Abba Amen in Mount Nitria. And when they met, Abba Amen said, "By your prayers, the number of the brethren increases." And this is the guy who kind of led the way, Anthony. "And some of them will want to build more cells where they may live in peace." Okay, getting kind of crowded. "How far away from here do you think we should build the cells?" Abba Anthony said, "Let us eat at the ninth hour, and then let us go out for a walk in the desert and explore the country." So they went out into the desert after they had eaten, and they walked until sunset. Then Abba Anthony said, "Let us pray and plant a cross here, so that those who wish to do so may build here. Then when those who remain there want to visit those who have come here, they can take a little food at the ninth hour and then come. If they do this, they will be able to keep in touch with each other without the distraction of mind." The distance was 12 miles. That's how close you want your neighbor to be, where you can eat in the evening, have time to walk there before dark. That's close enough. Close enough.
I think we're all a little bit closer than that today.
We are closer. We are closer. Close enough, but without distraction. How far away would people have to be to not be a distraction? They seem to find you wherever you go now. Okay, the value. We're back to John the Dwarf. Okay. Number 35. 35. It was said of Abba John that when he returned from harvest, or when he had been with some of the old men, the other monks, he gave himself to prayer, meditation, and psalmody, reading the Psalms, praying the Psalms. So his thoughts were reestablished in the previous order. So after he had this social contact, he needed some debriefing, some time to detox. Like Guy Sales said about silence from the noise. I feel that way. Sometimes after a very short period of time with social interaction, a little debriefing would do some good. You identify with any of these? Not maybe the extremes, but depends on who you're trying to find solitude away from, right? Isaac the Theban.
I tend to see, I see these people as like current days having some kind of, diagnosis.
Yeah, and oftentimes those who pursue their spirituality,
Yeah.
people think they're out of touch.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you start thinking that about yourself after a while of reading this.
But I can understand how you can get to more and more reclusive.
Yeah.
Being a little reclusive leads to more,
I think I experienced that from COVID.
Yeah. I think, yeah,
Yeah, I think we all kind of did a little
yeah,
bit.
I think so.
I don't think I've been to outside of church stuff. We don't have that many in-person meetings. I don't think I've been to another in-person meeting since COVID started.
Well, and when we first came back, it felt kind of weird. I mean,
Mhm.
it was like you didn't know whether you wanted to be around people or not.
Yeah.
Mhm. I've
I
gotten,
think it did change though.
I've gotten a lot more inclined to just sit in my study with my dog. You know, that's fine. Just stay in my cell.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that probably happened with some of these people too. When they,
Yeah, they are human.
uh-huh.
And so you begin to close down those social interactions. If you can find a way to be content and find some satisfaction with your focus of what you're doing, yeah, you become conditioned to stay there, and it gets very uncomfortable to return and leave that security. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Probably
Well,
some-
that story about him going into the city and not looking at anyone, that is a picture of someone who,
Had their masks on. And,
yeah, who is like so overwhelmed by it
Uh-huh.
because they're not used to it, that you just, yeah,
Uh-huh.
put your hood up and your face down and go through.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Not to turn these guys into,
lunatics.
Yeah.
Yeah, the verdict's still out on that, I think.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I think COVID did that to me, and I think it might have done it to some others to a certain degree. Okay, who are we looking at? Made me lose my place.
Sorry.
Isaac the Theban. All right. Number 2, sir? Yes. Here's kind of the value of, we've been critical, judgmental even,
Not judging you, I'm just saying.
of solitude, but here's another value that's found in it. It was said that Abba Apollo, that he had a disciple named Isaac, perfectly trained in all good works, and he had the gift of ceaseless prayer at the time of the Eucharist. When he came to church, he did not allow anyone to join him. Now, sitting on my pew. Right? He used to say that all things are good in their proper time. There's a time for everything. As soon as the worship was concluded, he fled, as though pursued by fire, and hurried back to his cell. Now, at the conclusion of the service, a piece of bread and cup of wine was often given to the brethren, but he did not accept it. Not that he wanted to refuse the agape or the love of the brethren, but because he wished to preserve the ceaseless prayer of the service. Now it happened that he fell ill. When they heard of it, brethren came to visit him. Sitting beside him, they asked him, Abba Isaac, why do you flee from the brethren at the end of worship? He said to them, I am not fleeing from the brethren, but from the wicked ruse of the demons. When someone is holding a lighted lamp, if he lingers in the open air, the lamp goes out because of the wind. We are the same. When we are illuminated by the Holy Eucharist, we linger outside our cell, our spirit becomes darkened. Such was the way of life of the holy Abba Isaac.
That's why some people rush out.
Don't stay for fellowship.
They don't stay for
just
fellowship.
can't lose
They
them with
don't
their
wanna
light
lose
go
their
out.
light, yeah.
Yeah. So avoidance, social distancing at its best. Avoidance. But they frame it so nicely, Frame it so nicely. And here is Abba Or. Okay. He propounded saying, if you are fleeing, flee from men, or the world and the men in it will make you do many foolish things. Okay. Peer pressure.
I was just gonna say peer
Peer
pressure. It was just coming out
Peer
of my mouth.
pressure. So this is kind of a basis that fostered a way of life that drew thousands of people into the desert. It'd be hard to sell that kind of real estate, that kind of philosophy or vantage, look at the world, that perspective. It'd be kind of hard to get people to buy into that now, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, even though there might be, I think there are a lot of people who are isolated, but they're filled with their phones or their or
There
games
you go.
or
This
TV
changes
or
everything,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think like I don't think groups gather like they used to.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it feels that way. Even having kids our kids' age, they don't like get together and do things. They communicate on the phone, they stay in touch on the phone, they're in group chats, but there's not so much like getting together as a group and doing things together. But they're not retreating in
No.
silence. They're they're constant input.
I mean, you see that when people go out as a family to go,
Oh
they
yeah.
sit down at the table and
everybody's
they're all on their
Everybody's on their own
phone.
device.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're a hermit of our devices more than a hermit of ourselves. They become ourselves and isolate us from contact.
So these are keeping people isolated at the same time that they're connecting,
Mhm.
but isolated socially.
Yeah.
Different.
I had a girl, a nurse at work who's probably one of our youngest nurses. She just graduated nursing school, so she's probably 23. And I don't know, we were just talking about books they listened to and on, music, that whatever. It was just a conversation.
Mhm.
And I don't remember how it came up, but something about just not listening to anything on the ride home. And she said, oh my gosh, I could never get in the car and not listen to something. I've never gotten in the car and not had something going. She's like, I don't want to be left with my own brain just thinking. I don't want to be, that's a scary place and I don't want to be there. And I think it really is true. Like, I know Elson's really bad about that. She constantly has something going.
Interesting.
A TV show, music.
Even in class at school, she's listening to something.
Yeah, I mean, constant. It's just constant input. And we took her to, Paul took her to the salt mine, like the salt room, and it like is.
You can't take devices. Your advice not to take devices in because the salt will damage it.
Yeah. So she had to stay home from school because she was really congested, and I was like, why don't I take her over to the salt mine, see if that helps? So I said, Elsa, Dad's going to take you to the salt mine today. I was getting ready for work, and she's like, but I can't take my phone in there. I'm like, I know, it's 45 minutes. You could take a book. You could take a puzzle. You could take a coloring book, you just can't take a device. And she's like, she got mad. She's like, I don't want to go and do that for 45 minutes. I don't want to be without my phone for 40. I mean, literally, it was like.
I might miss out on
The
something.
first 10 minutes she was in there, she couldn't even sit in a chair.
She's
wow.
yeah.
She would walking around in the salt and playing in the salt and lay down in it, just fidgety. I mean, too fidgety to even sit down. I just let her. She's still breathing the salt. It's not going to hurt her. So finally, after 10, 15 minutes, she sat down and just completely still and calm. When it was over, it's over already.
Huh,
But it took her that long
to wind down.
to wind down.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, I don't even know if the radio works in my car or how to work it.
You don't know how to
I've
turn
never
it
turned
on.
it on. Maybe for a baseball game if I was going
Yeah.
somewhere in the summer. But
Interesting.
so, all
Sorry,
right.
I didn't mean to derail it.
No,
I just am
no.
thinking about these
Keep
people.
thinking about
It's
this. Yeah.
like literally no input. Not it's we can't compare. We can't imagine that. I don't think because
Or even being away from being in an environment where there's no environmental sounds,
you're right. Yeah,
with traffic and
yeah,
sirens and
yeah.
bombardment of that being completely 12 miles from
Yeah.
the closest person.
So
The
there
sounds
wouldn't be
of-
any.
sounds of the
you
desert.
have nature sounds, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't have any other sounds.
No, right. I mean, not to throw Elsa under the bus. I mean, I grew up in a house where my mom had the TV on till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. She had to not have that TV on, so you know.
Well, lest we get the wrong idea about these guys, they're just completely antisocial. There's a little caveat from Abba Theodore of Ferme. Abba Theodore said, "The man who has learnt the sweetness of the cell flees from his neighbor, but not as though he despised him." Remember, they were there for the good of others, not the edification of themselves. So it wasn't a place to go hide, to get away from everybody, as much as it was a place to come to a spot where you knew what they needed. They were better able to offer that. And the greeting was, "May you be saved." Okay, so that's solitude to a point. To a point, but I don't think I could. Also, we just need some social interaction, contact. All right, I think we've got time, maybe not to do all this work, but we can start it. And like I said, this will serve as kind of a foundation. I think when we get to monks in the world, I think they're just, maybe deadbeats who want to live off the grid, in their day. Not have bills and responsibilities, but work. The work of the monk was maybe weaving baskets or weaving these ropes or some harvesting. Um, Depending on the regions they weren't all in sandy desert areas, but mostly I think it was, from what I picked up on illustrations mentioning, alluding to their work, was stuff like weaving ropes. That was a very popular thing, or baskets that were a daily needed commodity. So we do things like that. And maybe some other things. I'm not real up on the work that they did, but work became a central focus of the Western monasteries as they were developed. And being a communal, almost company given to, think about even the Advent movies we've seen of what they were doing. Remember the one with the trees? They had the dairy farm, and the butter and that kind of thing. So the work was central to the monastery that came out of the desert spirituality, that direct link from there to Western monasticism practices. So it will serve as a link to tell us that even when we're not retreating into the desert, to be mindfully about our work and devoted to it in the right kind of way. I'm not sure I'm going to read all this another time. Let's just do the sayings. So here's some desert sayings on work. This one is from Abba Arsenius. Got the wrong section. Abba Arsenius. Someone said to Blessed Arsenius, how is it that we, with all our education and our wide knowledge, get nowhere, while these Egyptian peasants acquire so many virtues? Abba Arsenius said to him, we indeed get nothing from our secular education, but these Egyptian peasants acquire their virtues by hard work. Okay, so they valued that and saw that, the school of hard knocks would teach people virtues. And how often is that true? More so than education when it comes to virtues of kindness or thoughtfulness or charity and generosity. You don't learn that all in a traditional education setting. You learn it by hard work. Achilles had a lot to say about work, actually. All right, I'll try on what it says. All right. Abba Amos said, with Abba Bitnus, we went to see Abba Achilles. So they're traveling in groups, these students. We heard him meditating on this saying, do not fear, Jacob, go down to Egypt. For a long time he remained making this meditation. When we knocked, he opened the door and asked us where we came from. Being afraid to say we came from the cells, we replied, from the mountain of Nitria. Then he said to us, what can I do for you who came from so far away? He asked us to come in. We noticed that he had been working the whole night and had woven a great deal. And we asked him to say a word to us. Give us a word. He said to us, from yesterday evening until now, I have woven 20 measures, although I do not need it. But it is for fear that God should be angry and accuse me, saying, why did you not work when you could have done so? That is why I gave myself to this labor and do as much as I can. So we went away greatly gratified. Doing stuff we don't have to. It's the opposite of procrastination. Planning ahead and working ahead. Why? Because God might say, why didn't you work when you could have? Not exactly the picture of lazy or not being industrious. I like that one from Achilles. Here's one from Abba Apollo. There was in the cells an old man called Apollo. If someone came to find him about doing a piece of work, he would set out joyfully, saying, I'm going to work with Christ today for the salvation of my soul, for this is the reward he gives.
I hear you saying that. I'm going to work with God today.
Yeah. We'll keep going. Theodore. Theodore also said, I love this. I love this one. This one is just over the top. Here's one for you now. Quotable quote. Abba Theodore said, "These days, many take their rest before God gives it." So not too high on those who aren't working or putting in their effort. Those who, would be, in his estimation, taking their rest before God gives it. All right. We're back to John the Dwarf. He's an intriguing one to me. 37. Okay. One of the fathers asked Abba John the Dwarf, "What is a monk?" Abba John said, "A monk is toil. The monk toils at all he does. That's what a monk is." All right. Pistamon. A brother asked Abba Pistamon, "What should I do? I get worried when I sell my manual work." The old man replied, "Abba Sisons and all the others used to sell their manual work. That is not dangerous in itself. But when you sell it, say the price of each thing just once. Then if you want to lower the price a little, you can do so. In this way, you will be at peace." The brother said, "If I can get what I need by other means, one means or another, do you still advise me to take the trouble to do manual work?" The old man replied, "This is a good one too. Even if you do have what you need by other means, do not give up manual work. Work as much as you can, only do it without getting worried about it." Even if you have what you need by other means, do not give up your manual labor. How many of us would keep working if we won the lottery? Right? Yeah.
Not you.
Sylvanus. Got 3 of these, Mark. We probably got time to read all of them. They're short. Abba Sylvanus said, "I am a slave, and my master says to me, 'Do your work, and I will feed you. But do not try to find out whence I shall feed you. Do not try to find out whether I have it, or whether I steal it, or whether I borrow it. Simply work, and I will feed you. Therefore, when I work, I eat the fruit of wages, but if I do not work, I eat charity." He also said, "Unhappy is the man whose reputation is greater than his work." That's a good one too. Quotable quote. Unhappy is the man whose reputation is greater than his work. That's what the desert fathers in Mississippi used to say, all hat and no cattle. Abba Moses asked Abba Sylvanus, "Can a man lay a new foundation every day?" The old man said, "If he works hard, he can lay a new foundation every moment." New things. I've heard that one before. Well, that's kind of what they had to say about work. We'll do a reading on work and sloth tomorrow on Windows, maybe to wrap it up. Any interaction or any more comments about that? Next week, we will look at desert virtues of humility, which we will introduce in the sermon on Sunday, and charity, which we will follow up with in a sermon on the next Sunday. Charity or love. which takes all of this full circle. This is why they were there. The full circle of any spiritual discipline is not self-edification, but developing a godlike compassion through your spiritual disciplines that causes you to engage with compassion and charity and love toward others. It's the goal, the outcome. So, there's one of them who said that the pure heart is a charitable heart or a loving heart. We haven't achieved that yet if charity and love for others is lacking. Okay, so that's where we'll go next week. Thanks for being here, and thanks to those who will watch later on YouTube and get caught up. And we'll see you Sunday and talk about humility.